Hey everyone, I'm pogging so hard right now, and it's Geographically Challenged episode
57. Da, da, da,
Whoa,
da, da,
that's
da, da, da,
crazy.
Wait, we
da,
have a
da, da,
theme song now?
da.
What the hell? You guys have upped production value since I was last on.
There's a
Yeah,
reason
that's
we have a
crazy.
theme song. It's because something finally happened that was good for Asian CS. Let's go! Woo! The Mongols! Woo! Someone finally did something. All right, we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, we have to welcome TeaTime back to the show. Obviously, Pilski's here. Everyone knows him. Bleh is still at the major. This is being recorded just prior to the start of the playoff stage of the major. TeaTime, you're in for, I think, the second appearance on Geographically Challenged. You've come back from the Asia RMI. You're feeling good. You must have watched all those major matches with the Mongolz. Lynn Vision. How you doing?
Well, I mean, I think I'm officially very geographically challenged now that I'm on for the second time. So I feel better, worse. I don't know where I stand with this one, but of course, I want to shout out to our sponsors, which is the entire country of Mongolia, for allowing this to happen. Really, I think that they're the primary reason for our happiness and our any continued form of viewership rise. I saw that viewership's been looking pretty good actually for these, Jordan. And
Yeah.
all I'd like to say is, we've had Australia succeed for years and years and years. It only took Mongolia getting good for like to get your viewership up to what 3,000-4,000 views an episode. Dude, this is prime stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know why that is. I mean, I feel like there should be probably more people from Australia watching, but I guess it is what it is. But yeah, obviously, that's the big talking point going into today, isn't it? We have to talk about the major and how that broke down, not just for the Mongols, but for Lynn Vision as well. We want to spread the love. I thought actually Lynn Vision didn't do too poorly. I thought that there was some positives to take from the major for them. But let's start with the Mongols, Pilski. First of all, obviously, making it out of the opening stage, that was kind of what we wanted to see. That was what we were hoping to see. We were building that storyline up on the last episode of Geographically Challenged and saying, this genuinely does feel like the first time where it's like kind of possible for a team from Asia to do it, at least in the post-COVID era, where in previous majors, you know, you'd be happy with taking a series or taking a map and, you know, maybe causing a bit of a ruckus, fuck your pick'ems kind of style. But I don't know that there was ever really a legitimate belief that a team was going to make it out of the opening stage until this time around. And I tell you what, the Mongols, I mean, they made us sweat a little bit for that one, because that was a little bit of a scary start. Obviously, losing to Eternal Fire, losing to Ecstatic. I was watching that Ecstatic game and I was thinking, fuck, like it's happening again, you know? I was thinking, Jesus Christ, we've built up the storyline. We're ready to see a team perform, and then all of a sudden they're just going to crash and burn. Because that Ecstatic game, it should have been winnable. They should have won it, I think, but they ended up sort of throwing it away. And luckily, they were able to sort of essentially reverse sweep the opening stage. I will say, with maybe some favorable draws, I don't think that the teams that they played against were necessarily some of like the worst teams that they could have possibly faced. But at the end of the day, you can only beat the teams that are in front of you. And the fact that they've managed to make it out of the opening stage into the elimination stage, and we'll talk about the elimination stage in a little bit, but they get that extra spot for Asia at the Shanghai Major, which is massive news. And congratulations, Mongols, for being the best Asian team in a very, very long time, and maybe even ever. I guess that's a conversation we can get into as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Billy, I will just jump in for one thing very quickly. One of the things that we have to also keep in mind, though, about the opponents that they get, Jordan, is that I think it's more than just, hey, you have to beat what's in front of you. It's about the Valve rankings. And for the first time in God knows how long, we actually have a properly seeded Asian team as well. I think Mongols could have gotten out of the opening stages of maybe a couple of majors before if we had proper rankings. But this is not just, hey, you beat the people who are in front of you. I think that's taking credit away from them. They get the people in front of them because of past success at large international tournaments. It's not just out of the blue that they're getting to play some of the worst teams. They deserve to play some of the worst teams.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard someone say something nice about Valve's rankings. So TeaTime, that's a world first. I'm happy to hear that. I don't know. I think I have mixed feelings. I will bite my tongue a little bit though, because I wasn't like a super big believer in Mazzino, and he played a lot better, and I think they played quite well and well-rounded as a team. Like the two newcomers, I wasn't super sold yet on 910 and Mazzino, but I think like they seem like a pretty well-rounded team right now. At least for the, you know, the stage where they did play Lynn Vision, which, by the way, that when I saw that fucking game get teed up, by the way, I'm sure we all had the same feeling. I'm just like, for fuck's sake, like, why does this happen every time?
I was a bit like 50-50 on it, because I was like, at least one of the Asia teams will now be one game away, right? Like, I had a feeling Lynn Vision wasn't going to do much anyway, so I was like, well, I'd rather them lose to the Mongolz than lose to like some other random team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think, yeah, I wasn't like super like thrilled with the teams that they beat. Look, Eternal Fire was looking hot, so I'm really not surprised they kind of
Still
got
are.
slapped a little bit. They still are, yeah. Ecstatic, like they definitely look like a pretty decent team at the moment. So it's good that like Mongolz can play like close with them. In terms of Europe, they're a team that I don't think they had very big expectations, but in a sea of like Danish disappointment for this major, I would say they have kind of been a team where it's just like, yeah, bro, there's still like a decent floor in Denmark, and you could still put 5 like Danish players together and find some decent results. So I think like my overall feelings is like they didn't play particularly great teams to qualify. So like I wasn't super impressed to go through to the actual major itself. But at the same time, I think that this kind of shows that there is a bare minimum level that Mongolz can hit. And this is like similar to what I was saying about the floor with Danish players, how you're bound to get like one team to go through because there's so much talent. I think the floor of Mongolz seems good enough to get to that stage, and that's why I'm happy. Like they are good enough to beat some of your CIS teams, some of your Brazilian teams, and they can be kind of the anchor that keeps Asia earning more spots and more opportunities in the major circuit, I feel.
What did you think,
this is where I am going to praise the VAR rankings twice, though, and that's where
it's definitely down on it, boys.
Listen, I can't believe I have to come out here and defend Valve. That's not what I'm used to doing.
Bro.
But
he's really trying to get on that next major. He's got the RMR in the back pocket now a couple of times in a row. He's like, I want to do.
Listen, I know how to angle for it. It's China. I'm Asia, right?
Yeah,
it makes sense. No, but actually, I think we haven't seen enough credit being given to the fact that we have an actual ranking system before the Swiss system that's helping us seed some of these teams into like the opening stage and the top 16 and whatnot directly as well. Because how many times do we have a major where, last year's Paris major, I think 3 of the bottom 8 seeded teams made it to top 8 in the end, right? Like, and we have so many majors where teams are seeded badly going into it that we have like just some of the top teams in the first phase for no reason whatsoever. Like you'll see phase come out in towards the bottom 24, whatever that stage was called. They've changed the name so many times as well. That this is one of the first few times we've actually had like a team list that makes sense, because the top 24 teams of the world theoretically aren't actually that good, right? Like you're not going to be looking at the rank 16 to 24 teams and being like, holy shit, these guys are amazing. They're flawless teams, right? And I'll just go through the teams that actually were bottom 8 at this tournament. Saw, Legacy, Gamer Legion, Lynn Vision, ENCE, Apex, Amcal, and Koi. Other than Saw, I don't think there's any other team that's actually better than the Mongolz, right? So the Swiss system did a pretty decent job of just making sure, hey, the teams that are left are going up against, one of whoever. Mongolz was 0-2 down. I think I was actually expecting them to reverse sweep because of this very fact, because I saw like the teams that they could have played up against. I just think this makes a lot of sense. And look, we did get a little bit lucky that a lot of the BO1s turned out as well as they did, and we didn't have as many ridiculous BO1 upsets early on. But I do still think that this is really just the system working as it's intended to. In a world where you have the actual bottom, 16 to 24 teams competing together, or rather, maybe not 16 to 24, it would be, God, I'm so bad at maths, 9 to 24. Yeah, bottom 9 to 24 teams competing together on a Swiss stage. I think an Asian team should have been coming out of that for a very long time now. But I don't think this would have been possible without the Valve rankings.
I don't know. I mean, I definitely subscribe to the belief that the Mongolz now is better than the Mongolz when they played at the Paris major.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm with you on that one, because they played it with Hastica, right? And that was a joke. So maybe before that.
Yeah, and it's just like there was a couple of instances where, in the previous major cycles, you would watch a team like Grayhound or Mongolz and think, man, they really could have won that game, but they just didn't have that like extra 5 or 10% that they feel like now they've kind of got. And even then, I kind of want to sort of tie that into the discussion around the elimination stage, because I felt like, again, even in the elimination stage when they were going up against Na'Vi and Pain in particular, those 2 games kind of felt like, if Mongolz have now had a little bit more experience, had 9-10 and Mizzino having been able to play a little bit longer in this roster, get more experience in these big events, like maybe there was a chance actually that they could have won a couple of those games in the elimination stage as well. And we're just like a little bit too early in the life cycle of the Mongolz in terms of being at that level, right? They've kind of, I guess, built themselves a stable base now in that they are competitive enough on an international level with like the tier 2 teams or the tier 1.5 teams where they can upset tier 1.5 teams, they can beat tier 2 teams, they can be competitive at that level. But when they're going up against like these teams like Na'Vi and Vitality, for example, maybe Pain's not quite part of that discussion just yet, but Pain was having a great major. So, it feels like there's like this level that they've hit and they're like 10% or 15% away from like hitting that next level where they're actually going to start really, really claiming some like very impressive scalps. And I think they could have definitely beaten Na'Vi in that BO1. I think they definitely could have beaten Pain in the BO3. It could have been a completely different story in the elimination stage, but they end up going 0-3 there, which is, look, I mean, it's a bit disappointing, I guess. You would have liked to have seen them maybe get a win or two there, but in the grand scheme of things, my like expectation, my hope, my goal for this team was to make it out of the opening stage. And if they did that, I didn't really care what happened in the elimination stage. Anything on top of that was going to be a bonus. So I'm very happy with what the Mongolz was able to achieve. But I think they've actually even shown us that there is a little bit more that they can give us in the future. And that makes me really quite positive going into the Shanghai major, for example.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if there's more of a ceiling there. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I really feel like they have like a solid floor right now, but I wonder how much more of a ceiling there is. Like, how much more can they get out of the players that they have to be able to actually start to put together best of 3 wins over like top teams? Like, they can play. They've definitely shown the potential to beat some of these teams at big events, like especially before they have started to look as solid as they have. We had those big games against Heroic and things like that in the past where they've shown the ability to, even in best of 3 series, which is the most impressive part, be able to actually beat some of the top teams in the world and then, choke or whatever. I'm kind of wondering whether they can actually consistently like challenge actual, top 10 teams in the world, or whether they're just going to start to, or whether they're about where they're going to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, they, as the Mongolz, are playing really well. A team like Pain, for example, is playing really well, and they can push their way into the top 20 teams in the world, for example. But like, can they be better than that? I don't really know.
Do you think that they performed to like their peak at this event? Because like for me, for example, I think Mizzino overperformed. We didn't expect him to play that well. I would say 9-10 debatably overperformed as well. I don't know that I was expecting him to be kind of as solid as he was in terms of just like an overall rating. But Techno definitely underperformed, especially in the early stages of the tournament. And I don't think Senzu was really up to the same caliber that he normally is either. And especially when we go into the elimination stage and we see these double AWP setups that they're bringing out. Like Senzu had a double AWP like a lot of the time, and a lot of the time it felt like that was part of the issue. So I don't know if we even really saw like, if we're really going to say like Mongolz played at their very best peak 110% at this major, I don't know that we're really quite at that point yet. I still feel like there's another level, like there's another couple of things that they can sort of fix up. I think Techno was sick at the start of the event as well. So, for example, was he under the weather in that ecstatic game? And if he's dropping his normal numbers, if he's doing his normal work, do they just win that game? And then they're 2-0 in the, 1-1, I should say, in the opening stage. And it's a completely different story from there. I personally think that the Mongolz were probably at like maybe 90% at this event. And I think they still have another level which they can hit. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think the Mongolz, look, I'm keep in mind that I am one of the biggest fans of the Mongolz when I say this, but I think people are really overestimating some of these players because Mizzino, I agree with you. He definitely overperformed. I actually think Mizzino's generally been a very good player in his career that I've seen him. The issue that I have with how he overperformed is it's all these super late round situations. And even when I used to watch this guy before, because I keep an eye out on like the ESEA Opens and the dredges of Asia where you actually get to see these young guys coming up. Mizzino's been really good in the early mid round. I've never thought he's some sort of late round decision making clutch beast. I don't think he's been in situations like that unless he's just vastly outskills his opponents. So yeah, this was a huge overperformance for him. I think 9-10 people have been sleeping on him though, because 9-10 was one of the oppers who a lot of people, including myself, have been wondering why he didn't find his way onto the Mongolz just quite yet, why he didn't find his way onto Eruption just quite yet. So that was quite surprising to me. that people are doubting him so much, because I think 910 is actually going to be one of the solid foundational pieces. And Techno's always been a little bit high variance. He doesn't necessarily always come into play feeling his A game and everything. And part of that comes down to how teams are playing up against him. So when you look over towards Ecstatic, who've got some very solid lurking players, who've got some pretty good comms, they're sort of some of the remnants of the national teams. I think Techno generally does tend to do slightly worse against them. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, it's also a big difference, because it's one of the few teams that Mongolz probably isn't heavily anti-strat preparing for. Because one of the things that you'll see when they're playing is Mongolz are running these great Tech 9 force buy rounds or Tech 9 half buy rounds, which are giving them quite a few round wins, which they shouldn't be having. And that comes from A, well, we're from Asia, we can do that, but also B, just feeling like you can pull together a lot of extra small strats because you're a team that doesn't get to play at every single tournament, so you get a lot more prep time. Ecstatic's the same way. So I do think that there's maybe a little bit of overestimation of the Mongolian players over here. And the reason why I insist that is because I think Blitz and his system have just been great in bringing all of these guys together, which is also one of the reasons why, to talk about Senzu's double op, the reason why, in my opinion, they have to double op for Senzu is because Senzu is just not the smartest player on CT side. You look over towards how he played on NKT, you look over towards how he was playing in these stacks like the Black Company and whatnot before. Senzu likes to push, Senzu likes to fight, and Senzu was opping a fair bit before as well. The op is where he gets a little bit more passive. The op is where he feels a little bit more controlled. His decision making feels better, but not to the extent where he can be a primary opper. A lot of people in Mongolia have tried this. They've proposed that Senzu should be the primary opper. So just to sort of recap, I don't think Senzu is that smart of a player. I think the double op is a handicap they have to lean on. I don't think Mizunia is going to be this good in the late rounds. I do think 910 is that good. So the foundational pieces for me are not 910, Senzu, Blitz, even, in my opinion. I think if you can raise Mizunya's floor so it's not just a late round accidental monster, if you can have Senzu be maybe a little bit smarter so you don't have to double op but not have the same ceiling necessarily, and you can just have Techno be slightly more consistent. It's not about the ceiling, actually. I think it's really about the floor for this team, because I don't think their ceiling is that high, because these 5 players don't play in a way where they can all 5 activate at the same time.
I mean, it's obviously worth mentioning that Blitz had a fantastic tournament as well. There was just solid across the board.
I'm so shocked.
Which was expected. Yeah, he's easily the best player in that roster, no doubt about it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I still feel like there's a little bit more that they can do. So I have faith going forward. One thing I will say is obviously Mizuno, very, very young guy. So, he's still got a lot of room to grow. He's got a lot of time to grow. We can give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, Senzu Techno as well, very, very young as well. So I'm willing to give him, again, like another 6 months with this roster. Like I don't personally think there needs to be a change going into the next major.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like I don't think like they're gonna be like, maybe if they peak for a while or they play really well at a tournament, they might like push like a top 8 or something like that if they like upset a good team. But like I really think Mongolz is about where they're gonna be. Like, they're going to be like, I think at absolute best, maybe if they had an insane like 2 tournament run, you could see them push like pretty close to the top 10 or something like that. But I don't think Mongolz is ever going to be like better than like a top 20 team. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially given like they're getting more out of the pieces than they necessarily should be getting. They're a team from a minor region in Asia. Like, I really think that they are doing very, very well for where they're from and who they have on the squad. And they're putting up very, very impressive results. And honestly, they are kind of hard carrying the rest of Asia on their back right now. So they should be very proud of that.
I mean, listen, I will interject. I don't think that people should be that hyped for the Mongols, but I think top 20 team is sort of pushing it. I would say this team could comfortably peak at like rank 12 in the world, in my opinion. Because I'm looking at the top 20 right now, right? Like, who's in this top 20 or who would even be here, even if, let's say, things were a little bit more stable? Furia, I think Mongolz is better than Furia. Apex is awful. Mongolz are definitely better than Apex. Complexity is a better team than Mongolz, but listen, that's like a 50-50 matchup, like in a head-to-head for me. Gamer Legion, I am a particular hater of Gamer Legion, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I don't think Gamer Legion is such a great team right now. They'll probably make changes and be a little bit better after the season. So again, maybe slightly better than Mongolz, not really too much so. And in fact, even though I think Seoul might be a better team than them, Mongolz should actually probably have better head-to-heads versus other teams than them, because I think Mongolz is more likely to win a map off of literally anyone in the world. It's just, I think BO3 is going to be a bit tricky. What? Bane, Ecstatic, and like, who is here to really challenge them in that top 20? I think Mongolz could be a number 12, number 13 team. Think of it this way. I think Mongolz could be like as good as Big.
Yeah,
that's what I would sort of say.
I could agree with that, but I don't agree that they're flat out better than all of the teams that you listed, because I don't genuinely believe that they can consistently beat all of those teams in best of threes. Like if I was to look at a game between Gamer
Furia,
Legion,
Apex, and Gamer Legion,
Furia, Apex, and Gamer Legion, I reckon that I would not be confident they would win those series consistently.
You guys
best of
think
three every time? That's my opinion.
This is where I wanted to lead this direction of, and I think you kind of already gone in that direction, but I just wanted to sort of compare, like if we compare the very best Asian roster that we had in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which was that Tyloo roster that hit top 10, where does Mongolz sit?
What about RNG, the Extreme Light Core?
I guess that's a bit of a technicality, I suppose. I'm just going to say Tyloo because they're from Asia. They're actually from Asia. Renegades was an ANZ team playing in the US, so it's a bit murky. But Mongolz are still playing in Asia for the most part.
Fair.
Where do we actually sit in that discussion? Like, is Mongolz now, quote unquote, better than Tyloo? I mean, I guess they are. I think they are, because the game itself has developed in such a way that they would easily be a better team if you would just match those two teams up right now.
I mean, of course, but it's more about contextual and the era as well, right?
That's more so what I'm asking. So you don't think they're at that level yet?
No.
How far do they have to go? How much further do they have to go to get to that?
Billy, I'll let you go first.
I don't even know, bro. I don't even know. Like, I can't even remember well enough, like, about Tyloo, because I see them as, like, in my brain. Like, I don't think I have all the facts, and I haven't done the research to answer that question accurately. But in my brain, there could be no more different teams than Tyloo and peak Tyloo and peak Mongolz. Like, Tyloo is literally just a clusterfuck. Like, holy fuck! Like, we're literally just spaghetti everywhere. We're not even really talking to each other. Sometimes, like somebody's just going to run out B apps and get a 4K. Just random shit happening all the time. We can play maybe 2 maps in the pool and hope the other team doesn't veto us to like the maps we literally cannot play. And then you have Mongolz who are like a well-drilled unit, like actually organized, they're actually trying to play, Europeans kind of CS and with their own like little flavor to it and play consistently. So I don't even know. I don't even think I can answer that question, to be honest.
Look, just the IEM Shanghai result for me makes it that Tyloo is a better team, right? Like, Tyloo got top 2 at a pretty large IEM event, which wasn't the most stacked field, I will say that, right? Like, back then you used to have IEMs with less, but even then, NRG was a top 5 team in the world at that point. Gambit was also like the team of cores with like major winners and whatnot. Like these guys were pretty good even at that point. Sure, VP had become pretty bad, but whatever. It's still like a lot of big names and everything as well. That's especially back then for Asian teams, you could just like crumble to the names and whatnot. Tyloo had that run. They had a decent showing at the London Major. They came top 16 over there as well. I don't know, man. I think we might underrate that Tyloo a little bit just because of the sheer stopping power that they had and the like tournament run ability that they had. I don't look at Mongolz and say, hey, I could see you guys getting top 6 at like a very robust format system like Katowice or Cologne. I saw like Tyloo and I could say that actually.
I got to look at like their results side by side, but yeah, I don't like Mongolz still hasn't done anything too crazy, you can put I can be so pessimistic about literally like everything, like I could look at the fact they made it through that last stage and be like, well, they didn't really beat that many good teams, whereas Tyloo has like occasionally gone into tournaments or gone into series against actual like top 5 teams in the world and beaten them and been like, what the fuck, how did this even happen, whereas I don't think Mongolz has quite done that yet. They've looked like they have the potential to do that at times, but not in like semi-finals or grand final series or anything like that. I need to see them make that actual deep run in a tournament that has status.
And also, like, Tyloo had to come up in a time when Renegades was good, right? Like when Australian CS was good. So even just domestic
what are you trying to
matchups
say?
and whatnot.
What are you trying to say?
Listen, we're gonna get to
what are you
this.
saying
We're gonna
right
get to this. I have words to be said again. Okay, I'm not stopping just because I was nicer at the RMR this time because I was a caster, not an analyst, right? But we're gonna talk about that later. But I think Tyloo is better in that regards, and also just overall, the more interesting conversation to me is, and I know recency bias will make everyone think, oh, this is a wash, whatever. Is Blitz the greatest Asian player of all time for Counter-Strike Global Offensive and CS2?
Ooh, I don't know if you can go past BnTet yet.
No.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The Cole BnTet is awful. BnTet wasn't that good.
BnTet now is awful, dude.
Oh my god!
Have you ever seen BnTet? Have you ever seen BnTet flash into banana or with Karath casting? Oh my god!
Oh my god! The Karath casting is what's maybe coloring your mind a bit here, but BnTet was not good enough. BnTet was just one of the only English-speaking players at a time where he then got imported over. You saw some good numbers from him overall, and then you're like, oh my god, this is great. Blitz is IG. Blitz. Wait. You know what? I'm changing the topic.
Look, I know what you're saying.
The channel headers underneath in YouTube, this is what they're about to say, guys. When you read it, like, what are these? Blitz should be given a Mongolian equivalent of a knighthood. He is single-handedly lifting the Mongolian esports economy in a way where in the next RMR, we're going to have 2 Mongolian teams actually make it to the major. How crazy is that? That's potentially like $5 to $8 million going into the Mongolian pockets over there. Orgs, players, everything. And for a country which is like $400 average monthly salary, Blitz deserves a knighthood, dude.
Hey,
that's
you're
what
coming
he
in
should
with
get.
the spicy takes. 2 Mongolian teams at the next major. He knows the audience.
Hey.
He knows the 75% of people that watch this show are Mongolian. He's just pandering to the crowd.
No,
hey man,
totally disagree.
That's all I do. I just fully pander. But no, I will say I think Blitz is such a better player than BnTet. Actually, the only player who might hold a candle to Blitz just in terms of what they've been able to do for the region is actually Excurate for me, because I think there's only one opper who we've ever had who was like legit great internationally as well and could frag out, dodge flashes, by the way. God, who knew we could do that? Maybe take some notes, Annihilation. I don't know why I'm saying that. I love you, Annihilation. I know I'm in your DMs telling you to play with me, but no. But it's just, I think Excurate might be one of the few people who is so exceptional at his role that he elevated Asia as an entire continent within that Tyloo team, and he was never like properly replaced from the Asian scene. I think Blitz is going to be a figure like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching back some of like those old sort of clips back in the like 6 months ago, and I was watching some of the Excurate clips, and I was like, "Fuck, I didn't remember how good this guy was." He was legit. Like on his day, he was fucking insane.
And then I see Kaze and I just feel sad. Like, this is what you could have been, Kaze. This is what you were destined for.
He was definitely up there at the time.
It just didn't line up. His teams were just never good enough. And yeah, I mean, we all know that Crazy Guy was the best AWPer of all time from Asia.
God,
so
you are right. You know what? I agree with you on that, actually.
All right. Well, we have to move on. Look, we've been talking about the Mongolz quite a lot. We've got a lot more to touch on here as well. But I guess the consensus is that Mongolz aren't quite there yet as the best Asian CS team of all time. But if they keep going in the right direction, maybe that's a conversation
Blitz should be knighted.
But Blitz should be knighted in whatever fashion they do that in Mongolia, if they even do that. Now, let's talk Lynn Vision. We haven't talked about Lynn Vision at the major. It's probably not going to be as long of a discussion what we saw from the Mongolz there. But I have to say, I thought they performed admirably, right? It was their first major. I think expectations were pretty low, but the fact that they avoided the 0-3 is kind of what made me happy. I didn't really, to be honest, even expect that they would make the major. Like I said, we sort of predicted Mongolz Grayhound to be the 2 from the RMR, but they did a pretty decent job. They lost to Heroic and Ecstatic and the Mongolz, which is all teams that you'd pretty much expect them to lose to, and they were able to beat Furia. So I'll take that. I'll call that a dub. I think that's decent enough from Lynn Vision.
I disagree, because the thing is, like, Chinese CS could be so good, and it's just like not really doing it for me right now. We all watched that Furia game. It's hard to be proud of like beating a team that literally falls over in front of you, and like you're just like, okay, I guess we'll win. Like, is
it better if you fall over yourself and they fall over you again?
Hey, that's what Asian CS teams usually do, to be fair. So like, I don't know, bro. That game was a mess. So that BO1 win, I don't feel great about that. And then they didn't really look that competitive against Heroic or Ecstatic and then lose to Mongolz. Is that really a great run? I think the best thing they probably did in the Asia RMR was beat in the RMR or the major cycle was beat Grayhound probably. And outside of that, I don't think I was that impressed by any of their results. I think that Lynn Vision is a team that's shown at international events a while ago that their peak can be really pushing teams that are actually of quite a high caliber on maps that they're comfortable on when they have a good read, when they're feeling it, when they get really hyped because they're a team that really thrives off energy and momentum, that they have that ceiling where they can be really good. Unfortunately, that time is not now. Like they are not playing very well. They're even losing to teams they shouldn't be losing to domestically. And I really don't hold Lynn Vision in very high regard right now. I don't really hold Tyloo in very high regard right now. I think China needs a bit of a one step back to two steps back, one step forward kind of approach to try to get their shit together, because there's so many talented players. There's so many players who have experience. There's many opportunities to go to top tier events, but it doesn't really feel like any of that's contributing to China being competitive. And in an era where we're hosting majors in the fucking country and big events are happening in the country, you really would like to see some competitive teams, and there just aren't any right now.
I'm with you on that, actually. I will say, I'll start off with the positives, right? The good thing is Starry actually played well for once.
Oh, Starry's insane. Starry is fucking
like,
insane.
You say this, but he's been awful over the last year, right? Like Starry hasn't just been one of the reasons why I was doubting Lynn Vision at that point. And frankly, it did feel like they missed their peak, because they peaked somewhere around last year. I would probably say October or November for me, when they were having that, I am China, now Chengdu qualify versus Tyloo and Lan and everything. I think they did a pretty good job there. But Starry was never a great player for this team for like a year, in my opinion. So when you actually go back and look at his ratings in CS2, I didn't do this before the show. I did this before the event, so I might be fuzzing up a little bit in numbers. If you take out any like domestic bottom feeder performances on HLTV, all of his stats versus any relevant teams were just awful. Like he doesn't do very well anymore in CS2 in 2023 from what I remember. So I'm just glad that he's back and he's doing well. I'm also glad Zacher is good, because Zacher did feel like the most consistent player for them, even though he is such a weird player from when he was opping, and now on rifling he just seems like a stud. I'm really disappointed about G. We didn't see G come through and be good. Like I was really hoping that G would do better. But honestly, when I saw G play up against Fozzy domestically on Rare Adam, that's when I realized, oh yeah, this guy's actually not going to do very much internationally. Like he's just not there. He needs a few more appearances and then maybe he could be there. The problem is that we can't assume that just because these are young players, they're going to continue growing, right? So even if Lynn Vision, for example, were to boot camp in Europe and whatnot, one of the things that I really wish they would have been able to afford before this event, I don't know what the financial situation of the organization are. I was under the impression that they should have enough capital, especially when they know they've made the major, to be able to do something like it. But I think that could maybe drive them forward. But I do think we're at a point where we've missed some of these peaks. And we've also missed Thorin, I think, once made a video about this called the IGL hangover about Fnatic, which was that when Pronax left for a few months, you still had the Pronax system before it like breaks down because of lack of evolution. And I do think we've seen a similar thing. Westmelon's been doing some decent IGLing, but a lot of the system must have been taken from X-Pro, even if he was changing some of the roles around. And I don't know if you have quite the coaching staff or the IGLing staff to fully make a new system like this. So I am looking forward to seeing some changes, to be honest. I think the issue is you don't have an opera other than Dan King who you can very easily pick up. I mean, the next best opera in China, of course not, it shouldn't happen as well. The next best opera in China is probably Tiger from New Happy, who, again, I don't really rate that highly. This is an awkward position for the team because they don't have any upgrades to go for over here that are like immediate and obvious, but they might be missing some peaks of their players as well. So I don't know, man. I'm not that high on Lynn Vision. I agree with Pilly. They had some doable matchups. They could have looked a little bit better in these matchups, but just it's just strange because I'm even looking at like the Ecstatic versus Lynn Vision match, and it's like if you look at the ratings, you wouldn't believe that Lynn Vision was as like non-competitive as it actually ended up being, but it just felt like in a lot of those later on situations it did break down, and that's not one of those things that you can fundamentally fix without a lot more experience.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I guess there's still a ways to go before we get to that Shanghai Major, which I think is really where push comes to shove for these Chinese teams. You know, this sort of still feels like they're in a bit of a like, okay, we're building. But once we hit the end of the year this year, then that's where we're going to be like, okay, well, if it's not working, then it's GG at that point. And since we're on the topic of the Chinese teams, we should probably touch on Tyloo again. We always love talking about Tyloo here on Geographically Challenged, and we were touching on it yesterday night. Pilski, when we were casting ESL Challenger League and watching their game, and we're just trying to figure out what actually is the roster for this team. Like, what is going on with this team? Because, you know, we see Advent still in there. It seems like, at least at the moment, it's Advent, Jamyoung, Mercury, ZDR, and Lyrics. And I want to get your thoughts on this one, TeaTime, because we haven't actually spoken about it, you and I, and I'd love to hear what you think about Tyloo, where things are at for this team at the moment. What combination of players would you like to see? Do you still want Advent there? And what do you think of ZDR and Lyrics? Because so far, from what I've seen in ESL Challenger League, they haven't really felt that they've been up to scratch with the rest of the team, at least in comparison to the likes of Mercury, Jamyoung, and maybe even to an extent Advent.
I will be perfectly honest, I haven't seen them play because like all they've played is ESL Challenger League. I haven't been able to keep up with that because the major cycle and everything's been going on as well. But that being said, I just to answer the first question, I don't think Advent should remain on this team. I'm really, really tired of this because of the simple reason that I don't think Advent's bad. I just think Advent's not going to take a team to a major. End of story. And right now, it's all about the major, be it because of financial reasons or be it because of Shanghai reasons or the fact that, hey, you know what, even later on, maybe they can qualify to an ESL Pro League, sure, but when they go to the ESL Pro League, they're one of the least competitive Asian teams that I've seen in a while. Like, I never see Tyloo now, and I think, hey, they're going to do anything. After that challenger at John Coping, where I really thought Tyloo could make top 4 or top 2. I genuinely did. I remember messaging you, Jordan, and saying, I think if we don't make top 2, I actually think we should be disappointed. They anti-stratted Monty on Anubis in that game, and they did all the right things because I did a ridiculous amount of research going into that event because it was my first time being an analyst and I was just scared shitless. So I just decided I'm going to watch every single Monty demo for like God knows how long. They got all the reads right. They did everything right. And these guys are so nervous that they missed every single opportunity. Every half-buy anti-strat that they had, they got into a site. They got into a position where they should be winning a duel, and they just missed 5 shots, like with a Tech 9. That's not something I can fix when you consider how old some of these players are. Like Jamyoung might not be old, but Jamyoung, Advent, and Kaze are so experienced. Right, they have so much Counter-Strike experience on the international level. They've been farming Asia for so long that they've been getting all of these invites to these pro leagues, this and that. What am I getting out of this team then? If that at that point, I have to blame leadership. I have to get Advent and Kami out of this team. I know Kami is probably just a fake coach anyway, right? Like he's more of an analyst because he's like a young guy, but I just don't want them around this team anymore, right? I don't care if I'm Tyloo that, hey, maybe he can make a pro league for us. That doesn't matter if you're never in contention for important matches at the RMR. If you're never in contention for important matches once you actually get to pro league, why do I want you on the team?
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do for Chengdu. Like, that's in 2 weeks. So
they need to stop fucking around. Like, it just needs to legit, like, Advent needs to be off the team.
Kaze needs to be off the team.
I mean, he is off the team, and I've said that for ages.
Is he? Okay.
Like, Kaze has been mid for way too long.
What I will say about that, though...
Wait, sorry. I know I'm supposed to be well informed about this, but I'm not. Who is the new opera?
Lyrics.
Okay, fair enough. And I thought Lyrics was one of the riflers that they're just shuffling around for some reason.
No, that's ZDR. ZDR is in there, but Lyrics apparently is IGL AWPA, from what I heard, which I haven't. Look, this is all hearsay. I haven't got any idea really. But from what I've seen of his AWPing exclusively, at least last night, it didn't really like. I was watching that and I was like, man, probably would be better off with Kaze here, to be honest.
Yeah. So I mean, I think. To be honest, like, I don't understand what they've been doing for so long, but we need to, like, take a step back. we need to either go down the road of Advent scouts players that he thinks are good and picks them up into the roster like he's done in the past multiple times and actually found good players that like literally I don't know where they fucking find players from because they don't have any competitive match experience a lot of the time. Or they need to do the opposite of that and they need to actually fucking start like looking at teams like Wings Up or teams like fucking New Happy and looking at those players and thinking like who is actually good from this team, and they need to fucking get those players and actually make like some development of a core, and Advent needs to be able to teach these people like how to play and impart some experience and have some of the older players like actually like foster like a good Chinese team. And it's going to take like a fucking year at least until they're even half decent. But either they need to do that or they need to go, and I think Mosey needs to be back on the team as well. Like it literally needs to be like Mercury, Jam Young, Mosey as the core of the team. And then Advent in some kind of GM or coaching role. And I really don't give a fuck who the other two players are. Like you could go with anyone for whatever your like your reasons are. You could get people like from legit obscurity, and I'm willing to give Advent the benefit of the doubt because he keeps fucking picking people out of complete obscurity and they're good. They end up being good. So if that's the role they want to go, the path they want to go down, then sure. Otherwise, they need to like. There's been players who have looked good at times or had good runs of form. Like, you know, we've had people from like Gas, like Child King, Flying, like all of these players that have come through China and they never actually go onto the top team because there's so much politics in the Chinese scene, or like, you know, I don't know what the reasons are exactly, but it never feels like Chinese tier 2 goes into the tier 1 teams almost ever. Like it almost never fucking happens for some reason. So I need to see a bit more of that, or see the Advent GM, but I'm not sure if that's something he wants to do. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
I mean, two things on that. I don't think Advent should GM or coach. I think Advent should go to a team like New Happy for one, because frankly, if he thinks he can do it, right? That's the only reason why he hasn't stepped down so far. If you think you can do it, go to New Happy, coach them, and I would prefer that just for the scene in general. I do think that IGL's vanishing is one of the worst things that can happen. I don't want him to become a GM. I don't want him to be a coach because I also don't think he has the leadership necessary to be a coach. Otherwise, he'd be doing that from inside the captain's chair directly, right? Maybe he can make good strats, do good anti-stratting, make good calls. But when I need a coach is when I need people to buckle down and actually get shit done and not like have their hands shake and be there like as a calming figure and a timeout and everything. Like, you know, if I'm G2, I look back, I'm like, oh my God, Taz, you beautiful bald man, you've won Katowice, you've won Major, you've done this, you've done that, right? Like you look over towards maybe even Bleed and they look back like, Kassad, you have all the best hot takes and hot take point made, right? You're like you hulking beast of a man. I look back like, Zonic, you are like the father I never had. I wish people would give me as much tough love as you gave Boros. You look back and you see Advent, you're like, oh shit, we're choking.
Yep.
There's
right?
but there's no one that can do that in the Chinese scene. They don't exist.
I don't think
they don't.
I think we're overvaluing a coach in that case, right? Like I don't necessarily want Advent to go into coaching chair. I would like him to keep playing. And here's the thing, and this is pure speculation. I have zero inside knowledge. I'm just guessing this. I'm assuming that a lot of the Chinese issues come from Tyloo, the organization, right? Like Lord Rabbit, like I think this is one of the first times they've like officially acknowledged Lord Rabbit as their feed team, because I know Lord Rabbit's been an ESL challenger while Tyloo's been an ESL challenger as well, which is not allowed. That is very against the rules if that's their feed team. So if Tyloo want to have like this feeder system and this academy system, and them as an organization want to prioritize that over potentially large buyouts from other organizations, I get that. I understand. Like you're trying to run your own business, make your own company, whatever that is. I think that's not necessarily the smartest way of going about it. But also, I don't know how high buyouts in China are, right? Maybe it's like Brazil, and it's ridiculous. So I don't really know how that works. I mean, yeah, I would guess so too. Go ahead.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, but I think that the timing of all of this just doesn't make sense. Like, their slow development approach is like a next year thing. Like this year,
I mean,
with what's coming up,
don't get me
you
wrong.
fucking go for it. Like you don't think about buyouts, you don't think about anything. If you're serious about like CS in China and you're an org, like this is the year where you're like, what's the fucking super team? And if you don't do that, then like, and you're not gonna do anything. Like these Chinese teams, the way they are not going to do anything. They don't have the time to develop talent. So either they have to give up on making the relevant tournaments that are happening this year, which is fucking emo, or next year they build a pipeline. What's the meme phrase? And talent pipeline. Let's start piping. Let's start piping some shit. Right. And next year maybe we'll do something.
Look, I just think that if they want to make a big move, it's about getting X-Pro onto this team, to be honest. Like, buy him out from Adam. That's the only IGL I can actually see coming into Tyloo and actually maybe having an impact. There's no other Chinese IGLs I would rather have. I wouldn't have Westmelon on this team. There's too much of a role clash with some of the Tyloo players, and you'd have to have Westmelon completely change how he plays as well. And then for an Opper, I'm with Billy, bro. Flip a coin. Who gives a fuck? Right? Like, who cares? Just don't be garbage, and we're fine. Like, I want you to play like 9 op, right? Which was, hey, I know I'm not the best opper. I'm just not gonna die all that many times. I'm gonna throw some flashes for you guys. I'm gonna be a good supportive opper. I'll be like Smiths.
I mean, having some crazy opper at the moment is not even like that valuable. I don't think in the current meta of CS.
Well, actually, since we're continuing on the topic of Chinese CS, and you mentioned X-Pro from Rare Atom. Does anyone know what actually is happening with Rare Atom at this point in time? Because it seems like they have just imploded. I don't know if we've talked about this already. I don't think we have talked about it on Geographically Challenged just yet. I don't even know if there was an announcement from Rare Atom. But as of yesterday night, it seems like they forfeited all of their ESL Challenger League games. And I thought I saw a couple of their European members might be trialing for a couple of European teams. So I don't know what's going on.
But European Chinese mix not working out. That's fucking crazy,
the second one in like a month, basically, by the way. Because I remember we talked about Wings Up going boom about a month ago.
Wings Up is a joke, in all fairness. Wings Up is just like that. That is just a joke. That's a separate story. But yeah.
This is crazy, bro. Oh, I shouldn't be memeing it so hard. I really shouldn't. But like,
I mean, I actually do think it's kind of crazy because Rare Atom's at org with money. I'm sure that these players are getting paid. Also, I mean, I do think that the Asian European mix is really weird. Don't get me wrong, because I don't know what the fluency levels are on these guys. But that being said, Tyloo, if there's ever a point to bring out the check for X-Pro, this is it.
I thought we were going to say it. I thought there was going to be a different name coming out of
We need Fozzy.
I don't rate Fozzy that much. I think Fozzy's good. I think Fozzy's good. I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's good enough to justify. Look, if you want me to bring in the hot takes, I will, right? Because I can't be on hot take point made because that show doesn't have guests and they wouldn't have me even if they did. So I'm going to pretend like this is my platform, guys. I'm sorry for stealing this away from you. I want Smooya on Tyloo.
Oh my god!
And listen.
Mike is not going to happen, bro. Let it go.
I can justify. I swear, I wish Snappy was. I can justify this. Okay, I can justify it. What's Smooya's biggest issue in a team? He talks too much shit. He's too abrasive. He's a little bit too arrogant sometimes, and he's not really like that socially in tune. What's the benefit of having him on a Chinese team? They won't know what the fuck he's saying. All he has to do is shoot people in the server, and he can make whatever Rat King noises he wants to make that he was making a flash. Like, they're just going to think, oh, what is this, some kind of British battle cry? Is this what they say like right before they come into a server? Is it? It's just like, hey, this makes perfect sense for me. Get Dexter, get Smooya, get any one of the really toxic operas that you can get your hands on and put them on Tyloo with X-Pro. Easy.
I'll tell you what. One thing I will say is thank you, TeaTime, because that is going to make an absolute banger of a short. That's going to be an absolute banger of a short.
I'm here for the content.
I hate your idea, though. I don't agree with
you are on drugs, though. Like, let's be honest. You are fucking smoking so much right now.
Okay. Look, let's jump forward then. Enjoy it. We'll see what happens with Rare Atom. We'll keep you up to date if we hear anything, but it seems like maybe they've just boomed, so could be a bit of a shuffle going on.
Get the back together. Let's go. Tyloo to the major. Somebody, Summer. Who else are we putting on the team?
X-Pro.
They get BnTet back on there as well. So I
Jamie,
can
I'm
completely
stupid.
claw my
BnTet's
eyes
free
out.
agent.
I thought we agreed, Jordan. I thought we were like tied on this. Steel Helmet is the third best team, so Captain Mo is back on the team again.
Yes.
Best team in China.
Wait, we
We
need Captain
talked
Mo
about
and
this,
Xiao
right?
Saga on the same team though, otherwise like it doesn't exist.
Yes. Now that's the team that's going to restore.
That actually
Xiao
does sound like a
Saga-
Tyloo roster, by the way, because there's about 15 people there. So
Dude, Shasaga is one of the
God
people who
bless.
like I just see him on talent announcements for China. I'm like, oh my god, you are living every talent's dream where you can actually delude yourself into thinking, yeah, I could make the RMR if I really want to.
yeah, he's
honestly
a beast.
though,
He's good.
honestly
Till he's
though,
like, honestly though, I could IGL better than Dexter. You're right. He's awful.
not anymore, not anymore. But anyway, I think like. I think there could be some like if you could get some CIS players into Tyloo, I'd actually fuck with that, to be honest.
All right. Well, look, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole just yet, but we've got a couple more quickfire topics to touch on before we go today. The first one is Skyesports is moving online. Skyesports Masters or whatever what is it? Skyesports Championship? I don't know. Whatever
I
that
think
tournament
it's
is.
championship.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, I think it's Championship. The one that clashes with Chengdu. So first of all, the problem is you're clashing with Chengdu, so that's going to be pretty hard. People are more than likely going to watch Chengdu. I like the fact that they are trying something, though. I think it's a cool kind of idea as far as a tournament is concerned. You've got quite a few of those teams that didn't make it to Chengdu that are going to try to play in Skyesports Championship, and I think that's cool. But I heard that there was something to do with elections going on in India. Maybe you know something more about this, TeaTime, since it's a bit closer to.
Sorry, man.
home.
Wrong shade of brown.
I know it's I know. But I just thought maybe since you're so close by, you might have heard something.
Oh no, I am completely clueless about the Indian political cycle, other than the fact that they don't like us and we don't like them. Yeah,
There you go. Well, anyway, I think there's something going on with elections in India, and they couldn't find a venue or something like that, which is like kind of crazy.
Venue.
But anyway,
sorry. I don't know. For some reason in my head, I was like a venue for elections.
not for the election. The
Is that
elections, I
what
think, is
you
the
mean?
problem.
I mean, for the venue thing, I think it makes a little bit of sense just for context in case India works like we do. Is that a lot of these voting booths are in like just really large public areas that are government owned, and a lot of stadiums, for example, in Pakistan are government owned, and those are the cheap ones, right? So because I've looked into renting stadiums for esports events here as well. And like, by the way, for context, guess how much it costs to rent a stadium per day over here?
Pretty
Like
sure
a stadium
it's
with 15,000 people,
quite
indoor
cheap, isn't it?
capacity, fully electric lighting, ACs, everything. Guess how much it costs in US dollars, ideally.
Wouldn't have a
Per
clue.
day, like, I don't know, $5 grand.
Per day. $5,000, bro. 1.2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Bro, I could get a stadium.
You could actually do that.
Let's do a geographically challenged podcast in Pakistan.
Oh yeah, it would be like actually kind of late. Yeah, I mean, we would have to pay like $7,000 for your flights, but that's a separate story.
That's normal though. All
So
good.
if it's something like that, maybe it's because maybe like the government just saying, well, we're taking over all the governmental like spaces, and you can't have any of the cheap stadiums. You have to have maybe one of the private ones, and private ones are more expensive, right? You probably can't justify private spending, but I don't know. I'm just taking a guess. I don't know how it actually works in India.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, look, it's not really something that we can dive into too deep. I don't really have too much information. I know Liquid pulled out of the event. I don't know if it's as a result of the fact that it's moving online.
No,
or
Liquid
whatever.
pulled out because there was a free invite slot to Chengdu.
Oh, that's what it was.
That's
Yeah,
right,
of course.
yeah.
Yeah. So fair enough. Look, I mean, it's not ideal, obviously, but we'll see how it goes. I hope it still goes well, even if it is online. And wish them all the best. We'll keep up to date with that. The other one that we touched on in the last episode was the Atox changes, and before we knew what the change was going to be, we were talking about that, and then it got announced the night of the recording, so that was a bit awkward. But anyway, it is Annihilation that's going into Atox. That's something that we theorized might be a possibility. Pilski accuracy was the one that was removed. I can't really complain too much about this change. I wasn't super impressed about accuracy. I think Annihilation definitely has a higher ceiling. So overall, I think that's an upgrade, and that's kind of all I have to say about it.
Yeah. You know, I feel like this is like a slightly positive neutral like reaction from me. You know, I'm just like, yeah, okay. We'll see how it goes. I think Atox is already kind of cementing themselves as a pretty good team in Asia. They're definitely not a top team in Asia. They're kind of like a gatekeepy position right now, like tippy top of tier 2. With their current roster, I don't really see them pushing into the top couple of teams. So I'm all for them slowly making upgrades, slowly improving the roster. There's plenty of talent. in Mongolia. So I don't mind the approach from Atox of, you've had a good result. Let's not shake the boat too much, but let's, add something that we should consider an upgrade, someone that's got experience, see how it goes. Then, if we want to try to get it a step further, keep an eye on the scene. Maybe we can replace another player and just slowly start to get better and better. And maybe they can actually push into the tier 1, because I think they're on the right path right now. They're onto the right thing. It's just a question of whether they can, slowly keep moving in the right direction. And at least for Annihilation, after, obviously being taken off some of the very, very good Mongolian teams, and there's been a couple of Mongolian reshuffles or a couple of like pretty good name on paper teams like floating around at the moment. I hope that he's kind of learned some lessons and things like that, and maybe he can keep developing his game and be a good member on this Atox roster.
Annihilation hasn't played a single season of ESCA in CS2. He doesn't play in lower end Mongolian teams either, from what I know, unless he's just playing in random mixes. He doesn't play in these open qualifiers, from what I know. I haven't seen him play in a while. Annihilation, I don't know how good he is in CS2. That's a very simple thing.
Good
and here's another thing to keep in mind of. He's been a free agent. You could have had him, right? If you really thought this is the guy who's going to solve your problems, you get Annihilation. You don't get accuracy based off of, again, accuracy's experience when they got him was one season of ESEA Open on Guild Gaming where they stomped through. I will say he looked amazing. I actually think accuracy was decent. I don't think accuracy was a bad player. I think he was good enough to maybe justify keeping on this team for another, let's say, 2 months or so. If they thought that Annihilation is very clearly a last resort plan for these guys, because they could have had him for the RMR. There is no reason to not do that, right? So I'm just a little bit concerned. I am not necessarily positive on this yet. I'm neutral. I do think it makes sense theoretically on paper because, like you said, experience, yada, yada, yada. Asian Counter-Strike doesn't show that experience translate necessarily, though, right? I don't actually know how good Annihilation will be because he wasn't great on Mongolz or IHC back then. He wasn't really. He made his name on D13, and then he never really hit that peak again. He never looked that insane again. He never looked that consistent again. And that wasn't a sustainable style. But if you're now trying to be on a sustainable style, does that just mean you're not going to be good? And does that mean in CS2 you're going to be even worse? Like, there's a lot of questions about this that can't be answered. I think the real question for me is less about like, hey, why is like Annihilation here? Why is Zesta still here? Right, like he wasn't impressive. He wasn't impressive on Guild either. He wasn't one of the more impressive players overall. He's a solid player. Don't get me wrong, but you know how many solid players there are in Mongolia who have more experience than a guy who's 20 years old and hasn't really pushed any of the top Mongolian teams in their head-to-heads versus each other before either. He's probably doing well in scrims, don't get me wrong, but I just really wish, to be honest, that Yami hadn't up and left this team because he was horny to go play with Score. Yami on this team would still be such a fantastic overall lineup, but I just think they can't get him back, or maybe they don't want him back, whatever it is. They replace the player. I hope it's an upgrade. I like Atox because I like Dobo and Cabal a lot, but I just really, really hope Annihilation does well because Zesta's still a big bottleneck for this team for me.
Yeah, I think it's a bit funny, right, that Yami went to the Huns and then they kind of haven't done shit. Like, that team on paper looked pretty interesting. It looked like they'd be a pretty competitive roster, but it's just been like, whatever.
I mean, I kind of like
something good.
I kind of like the Huns roster better than I like Atox, but the results are not reflecting that, to be honest.
Shout out to Dobo and Cabal, man, the goats. That's Dobo and Cabal are like one of the few examples of veterancy working in Asia. Yep. Because so many times we say like veterans in Asia, and that means jack shit. Like, that doesn't mean anything. And this is one of the things that I actually was trying really hard to push this with Michael, Yumi, for anyone who's watching, which is the idea of panda vets for Asia, which for me was like pandemic veterans, which was just like these guys got a lot of experience in the online era. They have a lot of experience playing online, and these guys are technically veterans in the Asian scene, but they're not actually vets, right? Like Lynn Vision have been around forever. Westmelon's called like one of the vets of Chinese CS. He's not a vet. He doesn't have that much LAN experience. He doesn't have these things. Like, Dobu and Cabal, shout out to you guys, man. You guys are actually ridiculously good players in the sense that you are putting up such a foundation for your team that I think Dobu and Cabal are doing what Blitz basically is in the Mongolz, but just maybe on a slightly worse level.
Yeah, well, that's that one done and dusted. Let's move on to Sprout. Last topic of the day. Or actually, I have a little bit of a final topic before we do go as well, but that one's for you, TeaTime, a little special one. But cool. This is the first real topic. Sprout closes its doors, which is, you'd think, why is that on an Asia podcast? Well, Savage was playing for Sprout. Was it Sprout or Sprout Academy? Whatever it was. He literally last episode.
Azure was also playing for Sprout, wasn't he?
That was a while ago though. That's been it.
Okay.
But literally last episode, which was less than 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Savage going over to Europe to play in this Sprout roster. And now here we are. I think it's like 12 days later, talking about Sprout closing its doors. He's in Europe right now. He's just been mega fucked. So don't know that there's really too much to say here, but just feel bad for him. So hopefully he'll be able to land on his feet somewhere. Don't know where he could possibly end up over there in Europe. Hopefully he can find something. Otherwise, I guess he'll come back.
I think the only thing that I want to say about this is just a bigger conversation about how I feel about esports and esports players and esports organizations, and that because I feel like you focus a bit more on this when it happens to the bigger name players, but there is a large majority of players that people don't care about or haven't done anything or play in local domestic scenes that are getting fucked like all the time by shit like this all the time. Organizations not paying, organizations making promises that you can make commitments to, like players. I won't study for this 6 months. I'll pause my degree or something because I want to pursue this. I'll move countries. I'll move to the other side of the world. I'll move to a foreign country to pursue this and put my all into it. And then this organization, the whole time making these promises, will fold shortly after. And there are definitely people that would have known that before this kind of shit would have happened, that could have prevented this kind of thing. And this kind of shit happens all the time. And it's really sad. And it makes me not want to pursue this industry sometimes. And it happens in talent work as well. I think I would say I've been quite fortunate and lucky for most of my talent career to work with like a stable employer that I know, and like it's someone that I can talk to. But a lot of people who work in esports, whether you be as a player or broadcast talent or whatever role you perform, and this was the same case for me before I became talent, and I was a player playing for different organizations in my region. The amount of fuckery that goes on, it just honestly makes me sad. And this is a perfect fucking example of that. Like, old mate just moved to the other side of the fucking world, big commitment. And this kind of thing, this story, and I was quite skeptical about the move last episode. Like, don't get me wrong. If an Australian player moves to go play tier 3, tier 2 Europe, my initial thought is nothing's going to come of it. He's going to struggle to compete in that region. He's going to play on a team that probably isn't going to achieve any noteworthy results. And to make it as someone from a minor region, you have to be outstanding. You can't just be good. I'm not saying that this would have necessarily worked out this way, but what we all want, the romantic storyline is this guy goes over there and succeeds and inspires other people. And, we get more people who want to do this kind of thing. The actual result of what we get from stuff like this happening is more jadedness. We already, I don't know about the rest of Asia. I can't speak for other domestic scenes, but at least here in Australia, even the top fucking teams, even the top players are jaded as fuck. They're sick of getting fucked over. They're sick of all this bullshit. And this is another example that everyone in the scene just looks at, and it makes them think, why the fuck am I going to commit to esports?
All right. That's pretty depressing.
It's a young man's industry, that's for sure. I think there's no doubt about that. Esports is built on passion. And for a lot of our domestic scenes, that's what it is. I feel bad for Savage, right? But I also know that, listen, if you wanted stability, if you wanted something like that, there's probably like if you want to I appreciate Savage because he's prioritized greatness in his mind by joining Sprout and going over there. Because I know Savage had offers from like Indian organizations that are probably more financially stable and also probably could save more money because he's having all of his living costs paid for and he's living in India, right? Like it's things like this. And my only sort of like, I only have one thing to say, Play. I completely agree with you, but we don't need esports, right? Like at the end of the day, however jaded we are and everything, we don't need to be in esports, especially from like the perspective of esports doesn't need us. We don't really need to work in it. We don't necessarily need to play in it. And that's sort of the issue with passion industries, right? Be it acting, be it Hollywood, be it like whatever you want to look into, except for a very bare few, most of us are going to, not make it. Even when I look over towards our perspectives, right? Like, I mean, I've been doing this full time now for about 5 years, maybe 5 years or so. And the reason why I can do that is because I've got a very favorable exchange rate living in Pakistan, right? Like, it's not that I'm making money that I could live in Australia off of this. I couldn't, right? I don't know how long you guys have been doing this full time as well, but like, we are also survivors off that first sort of filter. We could just all go off and theoretically have regular jobs. I don't think this is that big of a deal. I really do feel bad for Savage. I feel bad for Sprout as well, because I know how hard it is to try and run a business and have that cave under you after you've put years of work into it. But also at the end of the day, there will be other organizations that hopefully do come up. There will be more opportunities that come up. And when it comes to the tier 2, tier 3 players of domestic regions, they will 99.9% of them will just vanish into obscurity. And taking a year off of university is not the worst thing in the world. I think the worst thing in the world is if you completely pause your life and like in a way for years, which is not resettable. That I would always recommend players not to do. Always have a backup plan. Always have a get out of jail card unless you are actually going to a major and making enough money there to survive the next year and a half, 2 years, and actually be able to reset and bounce back theoretically, right? That's I agree with that sentiment, but otherwise, sucks, man. I'm really sorry, Savage, but also whatever, right? Like, we are just all like the bodies that fall underneath the wheel of esports are what keep it driving along. Unfortunately, that's the same for every passion industry, which sucks, but it sort of is what it is. And it's also one of the reasons why I get so frustrated about the Australian scene, because I do genuinely think that, listen, I like what Savage has done because he's gone all in. I really think that for the Australian scene, if you're in Australia and you're like a top team, like for example Greyhounds is, the only way to succeed is to uproot your life, right? There's no in or out in
success.
between. Success, I genuinely mean like consistently making majors, potentially having a chance to get better. I don't think, I actually think Greyhounds not making the major was inevitable at some point because of how isolated they are. Like if you're a team like that, which does, I mean, I don't know them personally, you guys know them better than I do, but I'm assuming that considering they made the Paris major, they probably have some money in the bank account, right? Like I would say a team like yours should just be moving to Thailand. Low-cost country with great internet infrastructure where you can actually continue to play up against a very competitive scene of people who will want to play up against you. More tournaments, there's more investment coming in as well. There's all of these things. It's a good place to live as well. I'm not telling you to go like, live in Pakistan or whatever with me, even though, Ali, you want to come room with me? I'm always up for it. But like, I just think this is why I'm so critical of them, because you can't half-ass it, unfortunately, from these smaller regions. And this is also why I'm so hypercritical of Pakistani players. This is why I'm so hypercritical of like so many other players. You have to sort of go all in, especially if you have the financial capabilities and safety nets of doing so. And sure, that's easy for me to say that, hey, just uproot your entire life. But I'm sorry, this is just how esports works.
Yeah, it's hard. I kind of sympathize with it, obviously. I had an opportunity, I guess, like 6, 7, 8 years ago where I have a German passport. I could have moved to Europe and could have potentially made that leap myself, and I didn't do it. And obviously I'm still here in Australia, and I can talk about, it's difficult to be a caster from Australia, but I didn't necessarily make that move that potentially could have changed my career when I could have made it, and now it's much more difficult to do it as a nearly 30-year-old guy. But yeah, it is just one of those difficult decisions, I guess, that you have to make, and you have to weigh up what's more important to you than is it your lifestyle, is it your potential career, and something that everyone has to kind of figure out at one point or another. The final topic that I did have was TeaTime on Grayhound, but I guess I feel like you've kind of
we will go back to that, Jordan, but very quickly, just to put a bow on what you're saying, is my problem is always the same. You can't treat this like a 9 to 5, right? You can't be half in. So the same way where you're saying that, hey, I have so many issues being in like this local region and everything, fully understand, man. I share a lot of those issues, but this is where, if you are going to be in a passion industry which doesn't need you, which doesn't care about you, which is only at the end of the day a broadcast. This is a broadcast. It's a show. No one gives a shit about me. No one gives a shit about you. No one cares about us. We don't matter to the million people who are watching because we are not giant stars. Well, then you have to make that sacrifice. If you want to be, well, I want to have like compromises and this and that. Well, 9 to 5. Sorry. That's just how it goes. But yes, on Grayhound. My God, what are you guys doing? We need to have a conversation here. Jordan, Pilly, I need you guys to tell me, why is this happening? Why is it that I've just seen Dexter move off of Mousesports? Mousesports is suddenly like contending to maybe even win the major if they get a good bracket run, and like Cloud9 accidentally beats Spirit, or FaZe ends up in the major finals. Like Mousesports could genuinely win this entire thing, right? Dexter comes into Grayhound. I predicted that they would be the only team that could hold a candle to the Mongolz. I predicted they would be the team getting out of the major. Everyone's so sad about the fact that the Grayhound org is caved under. I don't even know what the Grayhound org did. I don't know if they were salaried or not. I actually don't know the detailed logistics about how all of this stuff works. My only question is, how is it that Australia has not managed to produce a team that can actually make it to the major up against like Accuracy, up against Zesta, up against Lynn Vision, who are looking awful right now because they've really clearly hit their peak and everything? What's going on with the Australian scene? Please, guys, this is where I'm just reaching out to you to ask, why is this happening? And I saw the Geographically Challenged before. Bleh is too kind to you guys. Why is Australia so bad at Counter-Strike right now when you have such good players? Inns is insane, dude. How are you wasting this guy's prime? Inns is the best Australian player in the world. Okay? He's the best. Not JKS, it's Inns. You have Dexter, who according to you guys was the IGL guy, right? Like, oh, come on, you've got him coming in. Why with just those two players, you should be better than a Lynn Vision who hadn't had Starry perform in a year before he finally found himself in an RMR. I don't know, he does yoga or whatever before he came into a match. Why is Australia bad at Counter-Strike?
I think if we knew the answer, it wouldn't have happened. That's the problem. Like, it's very hard to just go, yeah, this is the problem, because like, what is the problem? I think you're right. Like, what is the problem? I mean, yes, they don't have good practice. Yes, they're in a weird position.
No, just move the bird. But just move the Perth.
Yeah.
It's enough.
To be quite honest,
you're missing out on millions of dollars.
I had heard the rumor that they were scrimming on Guam against Asia teams anyway. I believe they were scrimming against Lynn Vision, and I think that was potentially actually part of the issue, was when they got to that decider match, was that was the team that they've been scrimming against. So,
well, question number 2 in that case, again, I don't know what the situation is for these players. Everyone can have their own life decisions. Everyone can choose to spend their money how they want it. We've all seen the numbers about the Paris Major. How do you not have enough money, or how do you not choose to invest that money to go have a boot camp in Europe? Is there any reason?
It's a choice.
This?
I think it's a choice. I know for a fact that they have the money. I know for a fact they have money.
So what you're telling me is, this is a team that could choose to live in Perth to have regular competition and lots more scrimming partners. By the way, it doesn't matter if you're scrimming on Guam for a month before, when Mongolz and Tyloo are off boot camping in Europe, right? Like, you already have taken away so much of the practice diversity in that regards, right? So you're not moving to Perth. You're not moving to Thailand. Fair enough. Okay, you know what? That's fine. You're not boot camping in Europe before, even though you have sort of the financial opportunity to do so, according to you guys, and according to what I speculate based on like the major earnings. When there are millions of dollars on the line for just qualifying to a major, this just reeks of stupidity and overconfidence to me. more than anything else. This just reeks of a team that thinks that they can make the major no matter what, and they're really underestimating their opponents. Because if you aren't giving it the respect it deserves to boot camp beforehand, if you don't want to uproot your life, okay, cool. I respect that. You know what? Dexter has children. Nah, he doesn't, but that did screw his career too, didn't it? My only question is now, why aren't you at least just spending a month in Serbia before? We saw what a level up the Mongolz players had. Why?
There was a bunch of qualifiers that they had to play prior to the RMR because there was, I think, the Dallas.
Do any of them give you millions of dollars?
That's a fair point. That's a very fair point. But the issue is, if you don't qualify for these events, someone else does, and someone else gets those ranking points. And if they don't get the ranking points, they don't get the invite to IEM Katowice, which is exactly what happened when they didn't play in the events last year. Rooster ended up going to Katowice instead. And you can say they get fucked in these events and they get nothing out of going to Katowice. They get nothing out of going to Dallas, but they do get lots of money out of going to the major, and that's all fair. But it is definitely a consideration that I think weighs quite heavily on their minds.
That is a very fair point. And going to events is fun. It's really nice. You know what else is nice? If you have that extra money, you can just bootcamp in Europe again. Look at all of these random tournaments that have $100,000 on the line every single time, and actually some sort of cracked competition. Go back to being, you know what? Don't spend all your time in Europe. Maybe just spend, 6 months a year there, a month before every major and 2 months otherwise. Right? I know it's a lot to ask for, but just... this is what I mean by half-assing it. You didn't make the major. Grayhound as an organization, whatever it was doing, has ceased to exist. Right? Like, if they were paying your salaries, that's not there anymore. This isn't because the Australian scene is underprivileged or whatever. That is true. It is. That affects every team other than yours because you've had the benefit of majors and sticker money. I have zero sympathy for this. This single-handedly puts Australia back more than anything else I have seen in Counter-Strike in so long. And I care about your island over there, man. Listen, I do, but I hate what you're doing.
A nice place.
I think.
All right, Pilski gets the final word because we're gonna have to wrap this up. So
the final word.
We're just gonna keep going in circles if we don't wrap it up. So let's.
Yeah, I think it's all valid criticism. At the same time, though, it's one tournament. Everyone can have a bad run at a minor. It happens sometimes. In terms of logistically, organizing a boot camp, it's worth mentioning that Dexter had 3 months on the team, leading into that, and we don't know what the logistics around that were. That was also Christmas break into New Year for some of that. So you're talking about lead-in time for a small organization to find some boot camp opportunity for 2.5 months. It might not have been logistically possible for them. I don't know what their situation is. And then you'd layer on all of what happened to them last year, which is, as Jordan mentioned, the ranking points not being taken because they physically cannot play in Australia while they're overseas. So they lose ranking points compared to teams that are grinding in Oceania.
The problem is that they don't get ranking points for playing at international events unless they win games. They weren't winning games at the international events, so they weren't getting ranking points. Therefore, they were also not playing at these local events, which they do win. So in theory, according to the rankings, teams like Rooster and BnK and fucking Mindfreak and whoever are better teams than Grayhound, according to the rankings, which is just obviously ludicrous, but it's just the way that it works, which is almost an argument to be made, why don't you get at least some points for playing at these international events? But then
EG happens, right?
You just keep getting free points and free points and free points, and yeah, it's a bit of a
and I will say, to cap it off, and this is not an excuse or any kind of justification, and we are talking about maybe some degree of complacency if that opportunity was there, and none of these excuses are valid. They have not qualified for a very long time. They have very consistently qualified for the major over and over and over and over and over again. And that does lead to a degree of confidence and a degree of complacency. And I agree that, it's inevitable that maybe they were going to miss out on one, and it's happened this time. But I think that the roster is basically the best roster you could make. And especially in the Oceanic scene right now. And I'm waiting to see what they do at the other tournaments before I say, okay, they didn't qualify for the major, it's GG. Because they do have other tournaments they're playing at, and every team can have a bad event. you know, if they do just absolutely shit the bed at Pro League and all that kind of stuff as well, then I'm on the Grayhound is not doing good train. But I don't know. I think that there's a lot of moving parts, and especially as a fan, no, this isn't directed at you necessarily, TeaTime, but as a fan or people that just watch Counter-Strike, they don't understand logistically what goes into being a Counter-Strike team, organizing boot camps, showing up for matches, how ranking points affect you, all of this shit, all of these balance of interests and expectations, as well as just the fact that you have got to get 5 cunts plus coach or manager or whatever to fucking sit down at PCs and practice and play, and old mate's girlfriend is sick and I'm fucking tired today, where like, I don't really feel like practicing, you know, blah 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 blah. There's a lot that goes into all of this shit, you know. So I don't know. I'm trying not to make excuses, trying not to be Greyhound apologist or anything. My whole take is, yeah, I mean, that fucking sucks that they didn't qualify for the major. There's a lot of reasons why it happened, but let's see how these other international events go, because that will be a better test than 3 months into a minor where they played pretty bad in one series.
Right. Seems like a good place to wrap it up. It's one of the longer episodes that we've had in recent times, but there you go. Love it. Appreciate you guys coming along with TeaTime. Nice to have you on again, and I'm sure we'll do it at some point in the future again as well. But for those of you watching along, thank you very much for getting to this point. If you'd like to ask any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments. There wasn't any from the last episode, so we'll skip that for this week. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, buymeacoffee.com/Elfishguy if you want to give us some money, and catch you in the next episode. Hey guys, just at the end of this video, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Jean, who is my first supporter on buymeacoffee.com. If you'd also like to support me financially or any of my content, make sure to check out the link. It is in the description box below.